illness who are more likely to be victims of gun violence than perpetrators. How do you plan to address gun violence while protecting those with mental illness who are more likely to be victims of gun violence than perpetrators?
Well, thank you, Nico. I think that's an excellent question because it gets to the heart of this debate that we've had about firearms. We here in the Commonwealth are flush with guns. We have more guns than we have people. And if you walk down the streets of anywhere that you find here in Newport News, I'm sure that you would be able to find a firearm if you absolutely kept looking. And the reason for that is because we have been derelict in our duty to be able to protect our community. We've made guns more important than people. We've made the protection of the Second Amendment more important than the protection of human life. And that is absolutely unacceptable. So the first thing is that I was the chief co-sponsor of a bill to create universal background checks. That's something that's supported by 92% of Virginians. I don't think you could get 92% of Virginians to be able to agree on what topping they want on pizza, let alone that they can all agree on one political thing. So that means that 8% of the population is controlling all of our lives and putting our lives at risk because they want to be able to be answerable to the gun manufacturers, to the gun lobby, to the NRA, and to the VCDL. That is absolutely, positively unacceptable. We are right here at New Beech Grove, and last February there were 3 young people who were shot by a block and a half from right where we sit right now. And those 3 young people, one of whom was totally uninvolved in any sort of shootout whatsoever. It was a 13-year-old girl. That is entirely unacceptable. And that's because there are too many darn guns on the street. That's it. So, in addition to universal background checks and talking about the mental health component, Nico, that you brought up, which I think is an excellent aspect. You know, we sort of demonize those who are dealing with mental health crises to the point that we all of a sudden think that they're the ones who are shooting up our schools. The vast majority of people who have been involved in mass shootings aren't suffering from a mental health crisis. They're suffering from an access to those firearms. But the majority of the people who are killed by firearms are not those in mass shootings that we see on television. It's the people who are dealing with suicide. And it's those who are dealing with in our communities with rampant gun and drug-related violence. You know, so one of the things that we've worked on is something called a red flag law. Right now, you can friends or family can go and get a judge to order that you be temporarily detained for up to 72 hours over at something like Eastern State or over at Riverside Health. Okay? There's a whole process for that. And that's for when somebody's in crisis, when you think that they're going to be a significant harm to themselves or others. But we don't have a process to take their gun. Think about that. It's easier to take your life and liberty than it is to take your gun. If you're suffering and in crisis, I know I certainly have had family members, I know I've certainly had been times where I was worried about people in my family, about people that I care about. And the way to be able to do that is to say, hey, we're going to take a time out for a moment. We're going to have a process, and we're going to make sure that there is due process, but we're going to make sure that maybe if you're suffering, you don't need to suffer with a gun in your hand. Think about that for a second. And then finally, for 2 decades, we had a 1 gun a month rule, all right? And it was successful. It led to less violent crime here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, under Republicans and Democrats alike. We all agreed, maybe you don't need to buy 15 guns at the same time. Just saying. So Virginia is the #1 source of firearms for New York City. Think about that. Kids up in New York City are dying because they have someone who's going to come down to about 15 gun shops that are in and around the ring around Fredericksburg. They come in, they buy an arsenal, and then they go up to New York to kill somebody else. Perhaps that's a little bit wrong. Perhaps that's a little bit immoral. Perhaps that is just plain evil. And we need to do something about it, and that's one of the things I will do, once again, if I'm your devil.